After the unexpected demise of his wife, a white billionaire's 4-year-old son falls silent for 2 months. But when a quiet black maid arrives, the boy looks at her and whispers, "Mama." The shocked father immediately dismisses her. However, the story is far from over, as the woman's hidden past and the unsettling truth behind his wife's death begin to surface. What he ultimately discovers will leave him devastated. Before we begin, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Please drop a comment and share your thoughts. The Whitmore Hill estate had not heard laughter in months, not since Amanda's passing. Now it stood as a silent mausoleum. Marble floors echoed with absence. Heavy velvet curtains were perpetually drawn, as if in perpetual mourning. Outside, the roses Amanda once tended now withered beneath an early frost. Inside, the air was heavy with unspoken sorrow. James Whitmore paced his office, phone pressed to his ear, his mind a million miles away. His fingers drummed against the edge of his walnut desk, his eyes constantly darting to the baby monitor he hadn't had the heart to remove. Liam hadn't uttered a single word in 63 days. The boy who once ran barefoot through the sunroom now hid under his blankets, recoiling from light and sound. At just 4 years old, he was consumed by a grief too profound for him to comprehend. And James, a CEO, a decision-maker, a problem-solver, was powerless. "She arrives today?" he asked the voice on the phone. "Sir." Kesha Williams. Referred by the agency. Clean record, reliable. What are her qualifications? Nothing standout. Housekeeping, some nannying. The quiet type. James sighed. "Fine. Make sure Gloria briefs her." He hung up and looked back at the screen, where a small tuft of brown hair was visible beneath Liam's blanket. His chest ached with a profound sense of helplessness. Amanda would have known what to do. Kesha arrived just after noon. She stood on the porch for a long moment, the rain dampening the shoulders of her simple gray coat. Her fingers clutched a canvas bag as if it held more than just her belongings. When the door opened, she blinked slowly as if adjusting to the intense quiet. Gloria met her with a gaze that assessed rather than welcomed. "You're early." "Yes, ma'am," Kesha replied without emotion. "Follow me." The vast house seemed to swallow her. They moved past portraits of ancestors and grand staircases that led to no happy memories. Gloria's tour was quick and impersonal. Kitchen, laundry chute, supply closet. Mr. Whitmore expects order, not chatter. The boy doesn't like strangers. Do your job and stay invisible. Understood. Kesha began that afternoon. She moved through the house like a wisp of smoke, barely there, yet her presence was felt. She didn't ask about routines or preferences. She folded blankets with a reverence. She picked up toys but didn't put them away, simply arranging them gently in places where little hands might find them again. When she cooked, she left the door ajar, humming soft lullabies too ancient to be from the radio. At night, she read fairy tales aloud in the pantry, her voice a warm thread weaving into the hallway. She never actively sought out Liam, but once she saw him peeking from behind the stairs. She didn't smile, just slid a toy firetruck across the floor before returning to her work. James noticed her only in fleeting moments. The scent of cinnamon in the morning, a neatly folded shirt he didn't remember leaving out, her face turned downward in focused concentration as she cleaned a window. One time when he came into the kitchen, she poured him coffee without a word. He saw the scar across her wrist and looked away too quickly. There was a profound stillness about her that made him uneasy, not because it was wrong, but because it felt hauntingly familiar. Liam started sleeping through the night. He still didn't speak, but he no longer thrashed in bed or pushed away his food. He clung to the toy truck she had left. He lay by the pantry door when she read. He ran his fingers over the seams of the blanket she had washed, as if trying to recall something. Gloria took notice. Her tone became sharper. "You're getting too comfortable," she said one evening. "Yes, ma'am." "The boy doesn't need any more confusion." Kesha didn't respond, but that night she folded another blanket and placed it outside Liam's door. The shift began in the basement. Kesha had volunteered to clean it. Gloria raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Among the broken lamps and forgotten boxes, Kesha found a crate marked with Amanda's initials. Inside were notes, clipped newspaper articles, children's drawings, and one photograph. It showed Amanda and Liam in the garden, their faces pressed together, bathed in sunlight. On the back, in Amanda's handwriting, were the words, Hold him through the dark. Kesha sat down slowly, her breath catching in her throat. She reached into her bag and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. After a long pause, she carefully placed the photo inside. Later that evening, as she folded towels outside Liam's room, Gloria appeared. "No one asked you to go down there." "I know. Why did you?" Kesha looked up. "Some messes start at the bottom." For the first time, Gloria's composure wavered, just a flicker. Then the coldness returned. "Remember your place." Kesha didn't answer. That night, when she read her story aloud in the pantry, her voice didn't tremble. It was steady, like a lifeline being thrown across a chasm. Upstairs, behind a slightly ajar bedroom door, a child's hand pressed against the wall, listening. And for the first time in weeks, Liam slept through the night. The house hadn't truly changed, but in its quiet corners and warm kitchens, something was beginning to shift, slowly, quietly, like ice thawing from a locked door. It began on a Tuesday when the rain finally stopped, and the house smelled faintly of wet earth and distant pine. James was gone, having left before dawn, the sound of his shoes on the marble floor echoing like gunshots. Gloria had said nothing when he passed her in the foyer, merely nodding with her coffee in hand, her lips pursed in a mix of disapproval and habit. The silence that followed his departure was different. It wasn't the brittle quiet of grief, but the kind that allowed a space to breathe. Kesha moved slowly through the dining room, polishing unused silver and straightening chairs that hadn't moved in weeks. There was a stillness to her work, a reverence not for the objects themselves, but for the memories they held. It was late afternoon when she felt a presence, not a sound or a whisper, but the unmistakable weight of someone watching. She turned her head slowly toward the staircase. Liam's face was half hidden in the narrow gap between the banister and the wall. His hair was mussed, and his small hands clung to the post as if it were his only anchor. Kesha said nothing. She didn't smile or gesture. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a clean mug. She filled it with warm milk and cocoa, no sugar, just as she imagined he would like it, and set it on the hallway table 3 steps away from where he stood. Then she walked away. She didn't look back, but in the kitchen she waited, not listening but sensing. And when she returned an hour later, the mug was empty, its handle still warm. That evening, as she wiped the stovetop and folded the last dish towel, Liam appeared again, this time closer. He stood just inside the archway, small and unmoving, his eyes impossibly wide. "Mama," he whispered. The word dropped like a stone into still water. Kesha's hand froze on the counter, her body still. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. She didn't smile. Her face didn't crumble. She simply looked at him with an ancient expression. Recognition, perhaps. Grief, perhaps. A love left unspoken. Second passed, then another. Behind them, the front door opened. Fast footsteps, a suitcase hitting the floor. James froze in the foyer. He saw his son first, the small frame near the kitchen, lips parted. Then his gaze lifted to Kesha, and for a fleeting moment his stomach churned. He saw Amanda standing there, her apron, her gentle voice, the way she used to hum at the end of the day. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice tight. Liam turned to him, startled. "Mama," he said again, softer this time. James's chest constricted. He stepped forward, a wave of anger rising. "No," he said sharply. "No, she is not your—" Kesha didn't flinch. She didn't defend herself. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Pack your things," James said, his voice now a cold command. "You're done here." She nodded once, silently, then turned and disappeared down the hallway. Behind him, Gloria emerged from the shadows of the study, her arms folded. She said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes, her eyes fixed on James not with concern, but with the satisfaction of a storm foretold and finally arrived. Upstairs, Liam thrashed in his bed that night, throwing toys and screaming into pillows. When Gloria came in, he bit her hand. James heard the commotion but did not move. He sat in Amanda's old reading chair, staring into the darkness. "She was too close," Gloria said later, pressing ice to her finger. He was confused. "Maybe it's better she's gone." James didn't answer. In the dark, he pressed the heel of his hand against his chest, gasping for air. He hadn't cried since Amanda's funeral. Kesha packed with care, every shirt folded, every pair of shoes wrapped in an old towel. She made no noise, did not rush. She moved like someone preparing to leave not just a house, but a part of herself behind. Before zipping her bag, she pulled a small piece of paper from her notebook. She wrote something slowly in the neat looping script of someone who had once taught children to trust words. She placed the note beneath Liam's pillow. It read, "You can speak when you're ready. No one will force you. Not anymore." Then she stepped out into the night, the door clicking softly behind her. The silence that returned to the Whitmore estate after Kesha's departure was not the same silence that had settled after Amanda's death. This one was sharper, more punishing. It had an edge like frost creeping up the inside of a window pane, the kind of silence that made walls seem closer, rooms smaller, and every ticking clock unbearable. Liam refused to eat, pushing his cereal bowl across the table each morning without looking up. He stopped sleeping through the night, waking in cold sweats, screaming for someone he never named. Each time, James sat by the door, frozen, unsure whether to comfort or retreat. He tried once, stepping toward the bed, but Liam buried his face in the sheets, trembling like a cornered animal sensing danger. James began sleeping in the study not out of convenience but guilt. He couldn't walk past the guest room without thinking of Kesha. He couldn't look at the breakfast table without remembering the warm smell of cinnamon or the gentle, deliberate way her hands moved, as if she were caring for something fragile, even when just folding napkins. Gloria resumed her routines with an added stiffness, a little more steel in her voice. She moved through the house like a warden, resetting things Kesha had touched, replacing her homemade soups with protein bars and silent dinners. When James asked about the boy, she would always reply, "He just needs time. The less disruption, the better." But time wasn't helping. If anything, Liam was unraveling once more. It was on the fourth night that James found himself in Amanda's old walk-in closet, surrounded by rows of untouched clothes and shoes. Her scent still clung faintly to the fabric, rose water and lemongrass. He sat down on the floor, a photo album open on his knees, his thumb brushing the curve of Amanda's smile in a picture of her and Liam at the lake. He found her journals buried beneath the scarves, pages filled with neat cursive full of thoughts she'd never said aloud. She had been fighting for something. Notes on community housing, speeches prepared for shareholder meetings, statistics about low-income eviction rates. And tucked between 2 pages, a printed email from Gloria. "Amanda, I urge you not to bring this up again at the next board meeting. You're putting yourself and James in a difficult position. There are eyes on you. Know your lane." James stared at it, his heart pounding. The date on the email was 3 days before Amanda's accident. He flipped through more papers, his breathing heavy, until a torn page caught his attention. A line scribbled in a rush. "I don't know who in this house still stands with me, but if anything happens, I pray Liam remembers my voice." James stood up slowly, blood draining from his face. The shadows in the room felt different now, thicker. Downstairs, Liam sat hunched on the floor, crayons scattered around him. His drawing wasn't childish like the others. It was deliberate. A woman wearing an apron stood in a hallway, one hand on her heart, the other stretched out toward a little boy curled in the corner. There were no faces, only silhouettes, but James knew immediately who she was. His breath hitched. "Who is this?" he asked softly. Liam didn't answer, but his small hand reached forward and tapped twice on the apron. That night, James made a dozen phone calls. Kesha didn't answer any of them. He returned to the kitchen to refill his coffee when he saw it. An envelope tucked between a stack of unopened mail, his name written in steady cursive. Inside was a single page, a copy of a license. Kesha Williams, certified child trauma specialist. Resigned 2 years ago. James leaned against the counter, stunned. A million thoughts collided at once. The way she never asked questions, how she moved with quiet assurance, how Liam had softened in her presence without him even noticing. He sank to the floor, clutching the paper, and whispered to no one, "What have I done?" Upstairs, Liam placed his drawing at the foot of his bed and lay down beside it. For the first time in days he didn't cry, but he didn't sleep either. He waited just in case she came back. James drove past the edge of town without truly seeing it. Trees blurred together. The sky hung low and gray. Every few minutes he glanced at the back seat where Liam dozed lightly, his arms curled around a warm blanket that still smelled faintly of cinnamon. Kesha had laundered it the week before she left. He'd called the agency twice with no response. He had left messages. And now he was here, following a faint address scribbled on a torn envelope he'd found inside the folder with her name. The neighborhood was modest. Weathered porches, swaying wind chimes. A woman across the street watched from behind her curtains as James got out of the car, adjusting his coat collar. He knocked once but there was no answer. He was about to turn away when the door opened. Kesha didn't look surprised. She looked tired and guarded. "You found me," she said. James swallowed. "I need to talk, please." Kesha glanced behind her. The house was dim but warm, a slow song playing somewhere in the background. She stepped aside. Inside, the walls were lined with photos, none recent, none of children. A single candle flickered on a side table. James took it all in, unsure how to begin. "He's talking again," he said finally. "After you left." Kesha didn't respond. She poured tea and motioned for him to sit. "Why did you come here?" "Really?" He exhaled. "Because I need your help. Not as a maid. Not as a nanny. I think you know things. I think you've seen things in that house that I didn't, that I refused to see." Kesha set the teacup down carefully, her hands trembling just slightly. "My son's name was Malachi," she said. "He was 4 when he drowned. It was supposed to be a birthday party. I looked away for 1 minute, just one. He didn't speak for 7 months. And when he did, it was to ask if angels breathe underwater. The silence that followed was heavy between them. I couldn't save him, but I learned how to listen. Not with ears. With everything else." James leaned forward. "Will you come back? As a partner, not staff." Kesha looked at him for a long moment. "That house has shadows, Mr. Whitmore. Not just grief. Control. Secrets." "I know," James said. "And I think Gloria knows more about Amanda's death than she said." When Kesha walked through the door of the Whitmore estate the next morning, Liam came running without hesitation. He latched onto her legs and held on tight. The moment cracked something open in James. Gloria stood at the top of the staircase, her knuckles white against the banister. "Back so soon," she said coolly. Kesha didn't look up. "I'm here to work differently." James met Gloria's gaze. "She's not staff anymore. She's here to help us understand what Amanda went through." Gloria's smile didn't reach her eyes. They started small. Kesha combed through Amanda's planner, highlighting inconsistencies. A call that interrupted Amanda's final conference, a voicemail with distorted audio, a change in GPS direction minutes before the crash. They brought in the former driver, an old friend of Amanda's who now lived 2 towns over. He recalled the message Amanda received before she suddenly changed course. "She told me Liam had a fever, that she needed to get home. But when I offered to drive, she refused, said someone else had already called." James clenched his jaw. He checked the logs. Gloria had called Amanda at 2:46 p.m. Amanda's car veered off the road at 3:04. It didn't make sense. Amanda wouldn't ignore her driver unless someone made it sound urgent, manipulated her. That evening, Kesha returned to the guest house where she stayed. She stared at her reflection. She wasn't here to relive her own pain. She was here because a woman had fought something and lost. And maybe, just maybe, she hadn't fought alone. James invited Gloria to the study the next night. She came dressed in pearls, with the air of someone confident in her position. "You called Amanda that day," he said. "Told her Liam was sick. I was concerned. You didn't tell me. You didn't tell the authorities." Gloria's face remained smooth. "I didn't think it mattered. But it did." She changed course. "She died." For the first time, Gloria's lips tightened. "I only wanted her to slow down, to think." The board was growing restless. She kept pushing that housing nonsense. She needed a reminder of priorities. James's voice dropped. "You manipulated her. I never meant for her to die." Kesha stepped into the room. She had been recording from the hallway. Gloria turned, startled. "You set it up," Kesha said quietly. "You made her panic. You knew how deeply she worried about Liam." Gloria's mask cracked and her eyes narrowed. "And what would you know about a mother's worry?" Kesha didn't flinch. "Everything." James stepped forward. "We'll let the police decide what's next." That night, as the house settled, Liam curled into Kesha's lap as she read from Amanda's favorite storybook. Outside, the wind rattled dry branches, but inside, something had shifted. Not peace, not yet, but truth had been spoken, and that was a start. Morning broke softly over Whitmore Hill, casting long light across the oak floors Amanda once polished herself. The house no longer felt like a museum. It exhaled. The heavy air that had once lingered like smoke had lifted, replaced by the quiet shuffle of new beginnings. But it hadn't come without cost. James stood by the window in his home office, staring out past the frost-covered roses. He hadn't worn a tie in days. His suit jacket remained untouched over the chair behind him. In his hand was a letter handwritten in Amanda's delicate script, found tucked inside an old cookbook. They won't let me finish this project. They're scared of what it says about us, that we care too much about people who have less. But I have to try, James. If I don't, then who am I? He had read it a dozen times, maybe more. Each word stung less than the one before, but the ache remained. Now, standing where he used to bark orders and hide from his own grief, James knew what he had to do. The voice in Amanda's letter was the one he had spent months trying to silence, but it had grown louder, especially since Kesha's return. Downstairs, Liam sat cross-legged at the breakfast table, his tongue sticking out slightly as he colored. Crayon in hand, he carefully shaded the dress on a smiling woman with dark skin and curly hair. The same figure appeared in every drawing now, no name but always there. Sometimes in a kitchen, sometimes beneath a tree, always beside him. When Kesha walked in with a bowl of cut apples, Liam looked up and grinned. "Thank you," he whispered. It was still a whisper, but it was voluntary, clear. Kesha simply nodded, placing the bowl beside him, then straightening the placemats as if everything mattered. That afternoon, James called for a board meeting. Not in the downtown glass tower, but in the sunroom Amanda used to fill with plants. The same room Liam once ran through barefoot. "I'm reopening the housing initiative," he told them. "The one Amanda started. We shelved it out of fear, of bad press, of false priorities. But she saw something we didn't, and it cost her more than we knew." There were murmurs, furrowed brows, a few protestations. But James was different now. His voice didn't waver. "You can vote to remove me if you like. But this company, this family will not silence compassion again." By the end of the week, plans were drawn up. Amanda's name was restored to the project's title, and those who had been fired under Gloria's influence for being culturally incompatible were quietly contacted and offered their jobs back with apologies. As for Gloria, her fall was swift. The recording Kesha had captured was handed to legal. There was no trial. James insisted on dignity, but there was exposure. The story spread internally. Shareholders read it. Donors whispered about it. Gloria was asked to resign from every board she sat on. The woman who had always measured her worth in control now had no hands left to hold power. When she left the estate, she didn't slam doors. She didn't beg. She packed methodically, her lips pursed as if still holding in judgment. At the gate, she glanced back once, not at the house but at Kesha, who stood beside Liam on the front steps. Kesha didn't speak, but her presence was enough. Gloria looked away first. James stepped beside Kesha. "I was blind for too long." She responded gently, "Grief blinds us all." That evening, James found Liam asleep on the floor of the sunroom, a blanket over his legs, colored pages scattered around him. Kesha sat nearby, knitting with slow, steady hands. The television was off. The only sound came from the soft clicking of her needles and the occasional shift of Liam's breath. James lowered himself into the armchair across from her. "You never said why you left your field." Kesha looked down. "My son Malachi. He drowned 2 years ago. I couldn't save him. After that, I couldn't look at another child without hearing the silence. But you came here." "I didn't come to heal," she said quietly. "I came to hide. But Liam, he wouldn't let me." They sat in silence after that. Not the kind of silence that demanded to be filled, but the kind that honored what had already been said. In the months that followed, Kesha didn't become a public figure. She didn't publish books or accept awards, but words spread in quiet circles. A child trauma specialist had returned to practice. She was asked to consult at a community center Amanda had once supported. She accepted. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Kesha left the Whitmore estate at 2 p.m., returning by dinner. Liam always greeted her with a new drawing. James always had tea ready. No one ever said it out loud, but the house felt different when she was gone, as if a string had been loosened. And when she returned, it gently pulled everything back together. One evening, as spring began to stretch across the hills, Liam climbed into James's lap, holding a photo. It was one of Amanda's. On the back, her handwriting again, "Hold him through the dark." James held the photo for a moment, then looked at his son. "She's still with us," he said. "And now so is Kesha." Liam nodded. "She holds the dark too. But it doesn't scare me anymore." The sun dipped low, painting golden light across the walls Amanda once loved. And in that light sat a boy who had found his voice again, a father who had learned to listen, and a woman who had once lost everything but somehow became the thread that held it all together. Not a mother, not a wife, not a savior, just someone who stayed. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.